This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics. We promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. In this episode, we have Guido Crego, VP of Product at Jampp. Guido, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Thank you, Art, for having me.
Terrific. Thank you for coming. All right. iOS 14.5. If you aren't in the app marketing industry, this version number of Apple's mobile operating system won't tell you about the whole drama associated with it. It's just what the settings apps on your iPhone suggested you to update your smartphone with. That's it. But if your job is to promote mobile apps, I bet you've been following the fallout of its release by Apple this spring real close. Today, Guido will shed some light on what's going on with App Retargeting, iOS versus Android ad campaigns shift, IDFA, and more. But as always in the show, let's talk about you, Guido, first. You know, you're actually the first Argentinian on the show, so this is our first chance to get a kind of a quick look into the culture, tech culture in Argentina a little bit. Please tell us about your background.
Sure. Well, Argentina is actually a very interesting place for tech. Although the internal market is small, a lot of the most successful tech companies in Latin America start from Argentina. So there is a vibrant tech ecosystem. And in the case of Jampp, although a big part of the team is here in Argentina, we are actually a global company. So most of our focus in terms of business is in North America, Asia, and those places. And in terms of my personal background, to be honest, I have a little bit of everything. So I started my career doing search engine optimization, and that opened me the doors to the whole rest of the digital marketing world. And as I'm a nerd, basically, I always look into the technology part of things and the technology side of the business, and that curiosity and with my experience in digital marketing brought me into more product development roles, and basically here I am.
Gotcha. So you're saying you used to be a search optimization guy back in the day. So I'm going to shake your hand from the other part of the world, because this is what was my entrance into the world of IT back in 2001, I guess, or 2020 years ago.
At that time, it was like one of the main channels to get traffic for a website and to get lead generation and things like that. So a lot of the people in ad tech started with search engine optimization.
Exactly. Now, what is Jampp? Tell me about your company. What do you folks do?
Sure. So Jampp is basically a programmatic advertising platform that is used by the most ambitious companies to accelerate their mobile businesses. Basically, we leverage machine learning, creative optimization, and proprietary advertising solutions to drive incremental growth to these companies. So that basically means that we run campaigns in the programmatic ecosystem for them to try to reach new users and to increase their post-install conversions, bookings, purchases, registrations, and things like that. Since the beginning of this year, since 2021, we have joined the Affle group, a global consumer intelligence technology company. So as part of this bigger group, we are now in a better position to continue with our plans to grow our platform and our business.
Gotcha. So you have joined your forces with the Affle company.
Yeah.
And now, first of all, a few months ago, it's been a few months since Apple introduced its app tracking transparency framework. Where do we stand with app retargeting right now? How this introduction influenced the app retargeting dynamics?
Sure. So at the beginning of this, remember that Apple introduced this notion of ATT last year. So at the beginning of the announcement, we have been seeing basically two different approaches. The first approach was like a real hard stop. Remember that the announcement of ATT was kind of at the same time that the pandemic started. So between COVID and ATT, we saw a lot of companies that drastically reduced their budgets given the uncertainty. But you had another bucket of companies where, based off this uncertainty, they were like full steam ahead, and their strategy was to retarget users as much as possible until they cannot do it anymore, so they can leverage the fact that they can still get insights on those users and those campaigns, and also leverage the fact that their other competitors may not be retargeting their users, so there was a competitive advantage to continue doing it. Today, after the official enforcement of ATT, after iOS 14.5, obviously retargeting in iOS is getting lower and lower, but the reality is that it's still alive, and today, in the last couple of months, we are actually seeing some growth. You need to consider that there's still around 30% of the iOS traffic that still has IDFA to do targeting. So a lot of advertisers are still leveraging that opportunity, and they want to squeeze that traffic and those user bases as much as possible. So we are seeing that, of course, the opportunity is smaller than before, but there's still an opportunity to do retargeting in iOS, and a lot of sophisticated advertisers are still leveraging it.
Got it. Now, when Apple announced the upcoming reduction of ATT and switching IDFA from opt-out to opt-in, one of the first observations was that app marketers will basically shift their budgets to Android. Have they been doing that? What's happening right now? And perhaps any data points to share to illustrate the dynamics of this shift?
Sure. So the reality is that we have been seeing different splits of budget in the last few months. So there are shift of budgets between user acquisition and retargeting, between Android and iOS, and also between IDFA-only campaigns versus scaled network campaigns. And the reality is that when it comes to the split per operating system, the reality is that it changes a lot depending on the region, mostly because, as you may know, different markets and different countries in the world will have a different penetration of operating system vendors. So places like Latin America, they are really big on Android, and iOS is not that big. So there's a natural concentration of budgets in Android on those regions, while in places like the US, of course, the penetration of iOS is much higher. So when you analyze the budget distribution, you need to take that in consideration to be able to do a proper analysis. Having that said, what we are seeing today is that a lot of companies are doing this split between Android and iOS that is like around 65% Android and 35% iOS, compared to a previous 50-50 distribution in most cases. And what we see is that there are many factors influencing this shift to Android. The first one being that, of course, ATT is a new challenge and is disrupting a lot the way marketers target users and measure the success. So while they still where they are still figuring out what to do with iOS 14, they shift budget to Android in the meantime. Another reason why budgets are being increased in Android is the fact that there's more competition in Android now because of this situation, and it means that in a lot of cases we are seeing an increase in eCPM. So basically, in order to continue to be competitive in Android, you need more budget and you need to spend more. So it's like a virtuous cycle of spending and price increases. And the other thing is that Android offers more actionable insights than scaled network in iOS, because you still have full granularity on your campaign variables, and you can use those insights in Android in some cases to extrapolate those learnings to iOS. So a lot of companies use Android not only to grow their Android business, but also to get insights to improve the iOS campaigns as well. But at the end of the day, the reality is that every company will be different. There is no hard rule that all companies are applying because it depends a lot of the company goals. It depends a lot on the business models. Some apps doing things like subscriptions may have more success in iOS, while companies doing more traditional e-commerce will have a more even distribution of return of investment in both platforms. So every company will be different. So there is no single answer for this. But yeah, I mean, it's something interesting to continue to see how companies evolve on these strategies.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see next year, kind of a mid next year, closer to the next release of iOS 16, I suppose it will be the number, when I think Apple will be continuing to advance the SCAD network system by then, and the dynamics will be kind of different. But I guess the overall observation that was done a few years ago, that basically money is on the iOS side, the reach is on the Android side, and the situation hasn't changed a lot. Okay, so moving on. What's going on with IDFA, our beloved IDFA? All of those initial fears that people will be just rejecting out of hand, they're tracking in apps in masses. Are those fears are coming through? Looking at mobile ad campaigns today, what is the split between campaigns run the SCAD network versus still running on IDFA? For people who could hear the dogs barking, that's okay. We're doing good. We're living in other times.
Actually, my dogs have a real fear for ATT, and they really suffer when people opt out. So totally makes sense. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the reality is that IDFA availability has been steadily decreasing since the beginning of this year. So when Apple started enforcing the ATT with the version iOS 14.5, we have seen a real impact. To give you some concrete figures, in April of this year, the availability of IDFA traffic was around 70%, and now we are talking about 30%. So the impact was substantial and was really real. The other way around, SCAD network adoption, meaning the amount of traffic that is SCAD network compatible, has been also growing substantially. It was 10% in April, and now today is 80%. What this means is that if you are running a campaign only using IDFA, because of the lack of availability of traffic and also the increasing competition in that traffic, you will reach lower volumes, and your CPAs or CPIs will be substantially higher. And when you run campaigns both with IDFA and SCAD network, what we are seeing today is that on the SCAD network side, CPIs are actually getting better than on the IDFA side of campaigns. Actually, in some cases, almost up to 40% better CPIs. So the reality today is that running only IDFA is not a good move. I mean, it's better because you have more granularity, you have more control, you have more targeting options, but because of the lack of traffic and the increase in competition, the results in IDFA are looking really bad. So in general, our recommendation is to run campaigns combining all traffic types and attribution types at the same time. So running IDFA, running SCAD network, and running, in some cases, also some probabilistic attribution. So in our case, at least, we push our advertisers and we help our advertisers to aim to have 100% of the campaigns running like this, combining all the attribution methods and combining all the traffic types. The reality is that, again, at the beginning of the year, especially when measuring only SCAD network campaigns, those SCAD network campaigns were performing really bad. But given that today we have more traffic available and our product has been developing a lot, today the results that we are seeing in SCAD network are actually pretty good. So we recommend advertisers to make the jump to scale network and run every type of traffic. And with that scenario, we can get results that are pretty good and in most cases comparable to the pre-scale network era, basically.
Yeah, so as time goes by, SCAD network becomes more mature. You're saying like the adoption rate jumped like 8 times since it was introduced in April. If this is the dynamic of adoption we're going to be seeing, months in the future, perhaps next spring, next summer, we will be see like the bulk of the campaigns being run against SCAD network, which will be more sophisticated by then. People will be more feeling more confident, having more experience, and knowing how to avoid the mistakes they were making in the past.
The reality is that we are all learning, right? So advertisers are learning how to do it. DSPs are learning how to do it. MMPs are learning how to do it. Supply partners are learning how to do it. So things are going to get better as long as we can continue sophisticating our strategy around here.
Got it. Now, knowing what you know about ATT, SCAD network adoption, IDFA deprecation rate, what are your thoughts on what's coming next? Is it doom and gloom as people thought the last spring or summer, or it was kind of a non-rational fears?
No, I don't think it was doom and gloom. The reality is that since the beginning, we saw this as a really disruptive thing, but at the same time, as a positive change, because this IDFA apocalypse, as a lot of people call it, basically forced the industry to go back to the blackboards and rethink what a successful campaign strategy looks like. In the last few years, the whole game was about getting behavioral data and using that data to target specific bucket of users based on their previous behavior and get conversions from that. And that helped generating a lot of growth, but also create this scenario where the game of running campaigns were more about capturing attribution, so basically cannibalizing some activity rather than convincing new users to discover and use new apps. And in that attribution game, companies like Google or Facebook were basically unbeatable because they control every data out there, and they have a massive reach for and a lot of tons of data points from users. So they were like the kings of that game. Today that's changing, and campaign success is no longer about user data, but about cleverly designed campaign strategies that combines great creatives, understanding placements, etc. So in that sense, I think that ATT has set a more level play field for all the ad tech players, and that's a good opportunity for the whole industry. Of course, there are many changes that we are still need to figure out, and we need to do a lot of testing and improvements and test a lot of new ideas and way to do things. But it's an opportunity to develop technology that respects the user decision when it comes to tracking or not tracking, and help advertisers to continue reach their potential users and customers. In terms of things that we are seeing in the industry, I think that there is an interesting movement from some companies to start measuring top-down campaign incrementality. So things like media mix modeling, where basically they try to measure the different channel mix of channels that they have to understand how different mixes will have different impact in the whole strategy. So I think that that's something important. And also another thing that we are seeing is that there is going to be this continuation of this trend of gaming studios consolidating and getting bigger, because they need bigger audiences that they can monetize, and they need more data points to be able to monetize their games and things like that. So and the other thing that I think we are going to see more and more in the future is more intelligence around creative production and creative optimization. The fact that you cannot have more behavioral data means that if you cannot target specific users that you know will convert, it means that you need to be really clever with showing the appealing messages in your creatives to users, so you can convince any type of user of using your app or playing your game. That means that you will need to invest a lot more in creative variations, in finding new ways to show your message in different placements and in different publishers. And I think that there is going to be a lot of development when it comes to creative production and optimization in this post-IDFA world.
Right, exactly. If I remember correctly, even by now, Google and Facebook combined hold like 85, between 80 and 90% of the advertising market. Two behemoths that are still holding the reins of the advertising world. And Apple's ATT introduction basically giving more air to breathe other companies, other competitors who can step in and get more get a bigger part of the market. And it's pretty substantial change for Facebook, even though publicly they're pretty good, they're pretty confident in what they're doing. But as far as I remember, then their conference call with their financial call for this last quarter was telling the stakeholders that things will be tougher no matter what do you think we're capable of doing. There's no other way around but to recognize that Apple's introduction, AT&T, is kind of dropping the support below the whole behavioral advertising model that Facebook has been building for years.
Sure.
And this is not doom and gloom. The world is not being concentrated in one company. There are a lot of other folks who are doing a great job. And you guys one of those. So we're good to go and good to grow and develop. Now, what do you think Google will be doing next? Will they follow the Apple's steps and will drop their version of the IDFA?
I think eventually Google will likely follow Apple's direction, but probably with a very different approach, mostly given that they are an advertising business versus like a software and hardware business like Apple. So they need to implement some user privacy-centric features, but avoiding hurting their advertising business. We have been seeing some steps in this direction. For example, this year, Android started enforcing the zero out of the Android advertising ID or the Google advertising ID when users opt out from advertising on the device, which is something that before users could opt out from advertising in Android, but publishers were not forced to actually remove that ID. Today, they are enforcing that, which is a step forward to be more conscious about user privacy. But let's see. I mean, the other thing is that these changes in iOS, as we discussed before, is providing Android with a lot of growth in terms of advertising budget, right? So if Google does something similar to this, it will probably take some time because they wouldn't want to scare away advertisers, right? So they need to do things in a smart way and gradually, so the changes that they apply on the advertising model are not impacting their whole business, basically.
Right, I would totally agree. We all remember Google Glass, their inroad into the hardware world, and it's basically dusted away. They used to own Boston Dynamics, trying to play with robots, but they had to sell the company. They used to own the patents from Motorola, and they sold those patents as well. So no matter what they're doing, they're really great in advertising business, and this is just what they need to run with and be careful not to break this system.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, now we're at the point of the show where I'm asking just a few quick questions to every guest I have on air to let the audience know my guests a little bit better. So here we go. Question number one. What smartphone do you have now? Have you been switching between iOS and Android or just staying one side consistently?
Today, my daily driver is an iPhone 12 Pro, I think. Yeah, it's a Pro one. But I also have a Motorola G5 just to test some apps and stuff that we do for work, basically. I think Android is really good for some things, but the reality is that the whole Apple ecosystem is really hard to beat when it comes to using like Mac, iPhone, iPad, etc. So I have been using mostly iPhones over the years, but also testing some Android stuff as well.
Gotcha. That's because of your work. Probably, if you weren't in the app industry, you wouldn't be using Android, right? As a second phone.
Probably. But the reality is that I'm a gadget geek, so probably I will test some devices just for the fun of it. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, do you remember your first mobile phone back in the day?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a Nokia something, one of the first ones, with the snake game on it.
Everybody remembers the snake game.
Yeah. But it was the first mobile game. So, and it was even before the GCM networks, remember that, before the SIM cards and things like that. So it was a really old one. But I always remember how good the battery life was on those devices. You charge your device only once a week or something like that, and you were good to go. So
it was still not there.
I mean, it was primitive. It was primitive, but in some aspects, it was really good.
Right. There's always a trade-off. These days, we would dream to charge our iPhones once a week.
Yeah.
Now, imagine you've left your beloved iPhone 12 at home. What would be the most missing feature for you?
Yeah. To be honest, I try to be somehow mindful of the whole phone addiction thing that we are all suffering. So I think that sometimes leaving your phone at home is not that bad. But having that said,
is there anything that you'll be missing, like something simple, something useful?
No, for sure. I mean, for sure, all the messaging apps to get in touch with all your people are going to be something that I will miss, because today we are using messaging apps for everything. I mean, in some cases, instead of ringing the bell when you visit someone, you just send him a message or send her a message to let them know that you are on the door. So that's pretty useful. And also Google Maps. I'm really bad with directions, so I don't know the streets and things like that. So Google Maps is really important for me,
especially when you're traveling.
Exactly,
it's really convenient. It's hard to remember the days when we didn't have Google Maps under tips. Now, do you think there's any hardware, software tech that you would like to have on your iPhone, which is not there at the moment, or probably developing, but not as good, as great you would like it to be?
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about the potential of VR and augmented reality like technologies. Apple has been doing a lot of effort there, but I think that there is still an opportunity there to be exploited, by apps and different companies. And probably when we have the Apple goggles or something like that, we will see a new bunch of experiences in terms of apps and games, and why not some business opportunities as well. So I'm looking forward to the development of that technology and see what happens there. Yeah.
Have you been trying live text?
Yeah.
That's pretty useful. Good. It's one of those cases which I didn't anticipate Apple will be implementing with this version of iOS. I thought ruler and stuff like, IKEA related implementation would be like the best case. But yeah, live text is pretty useful. Calling for numbers you can see on the street and on doors and stuff. It's really great. All right. Before I let you go, this was my last question, but before I let you go, how can people get in touch with you and get more information about what you do?
Sure. Well, basically, you can search me on LinkedIn, and you will find you can contact me there if you have questions or comments for me. But other than that, I will recommend you to visit our website. So it's jampp.com. And specifically, if you want to know more about iOS 14 and ATT and Scale Network, I recommend you to go to our specific section of the website, that is resources.jampp.com/iOS 14. And there you will find a lot of resources, case studies, and information about iOS 14 that I think is really useful.
Great. We will put those links into the description of this episode, so folks take notes. And that's it. Thanks a lot for your time and coming on our podcast, Guido. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. It was really good. Thank you.
And that was Guido Crego, VP of Product at Jampp. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. We release episodes on Mondays, so subscribe and you will be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review and comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And our episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.